Picture yourself a year from now, casually saying, "Yeah, that year flew by," and meaning nothing by it. That sentence is doing a lot of damage for how innocent it sounds. You don't feel like you failed, you just feel vaguely unchanged, which is somehow worse. You probably clicked this expecting urgency or a wake-up slap. But this is more like someone quietly pointing out the pattern you keep stepping into. I've done this long enough to know the danger zone is feeling reasonable about it. This video pretends to be serious because comedy wouldn't get past your defenses. If you want, like the video or subscribe. It helps justify my internet confession. And the part worth sticking around for is why this exact moment keeps repeating. At some point, usually while doing something very important, like refreshing an app you don't even like, you're already on one of two paths. One of them is quiet, padded, and extremely reasonable. It's the path where nothing technically goes wrong, which is why it's so popular. You stay safe, stay comfortable, stay basically the same, and tell yourself you'll make a real move once things calm down, which is adorable optimism. The other path is louder and messier, and has a reputation for being too much, mostly because it involves effort without immediate proof that it was worth it. Most people don't actively choose the comfortable path. They just never leave it. Hope does most of the heavy lifting. Hope, historically, is terrible at follow-through. And once you notice that, it starts explaining a lot of things you've been calling bad luck. Here's the uncomfortable part that sounds dramatic until you check your own history. A single year is more than enough time to quietly ruin things or quietly fix them. Not in a movie montage way. In a slow, boring, paperwork-heavy way. Life will change over the next 12 months, whether you're ready or not, which feels unfair until you realize time has never asked for consent. You don't get to pause it because you're tired or confused or waiting for clarity like it's a package that got delayed. The changes still stack. At first, they're small enough to ignore. Then suddenly, they're your personality. And that's when people say the year went by fast, which is usually code for, I wasn't paying attention. Most people don't quit because they're lazy. They quit because they're ambitious in the most self-sabotaging way possible. They try to change everything at once, like flipping a switch and expecting a new operating system. You stare at the entire mountain, panic quietly, and then decide the real problem is motivation, not scale. Real change is inconveniently uncinematic. It's slow, repetitive, and so subtle you assume it isn't working. Nothing happens for a while. Then, something tiny happens. Then, nothing again. And eventually, people act surprised, including you. I used to think that meant I was doing it wrong. It turns out, that's just what progress looks like when it's not trying to sell you something. You can absorb an impressive amount of information without anything in your life actually improving. Books, videos, podcasts, screenshots, notes you never reread. It feels productive in the same way rearranging furniture feels like cleaning. You're still in the same room. Action is the part everyone quietly avoids because it doesn't feel like learning, it feels like risk, even when the risk is embarrassingly small. And no, you don't need confidence for this. Confidence is usually the reward, not the entry requirement. You also don't need a dramatic reinvention or a public announcement or a color-coded life plan. Most change starts as something so unremarkable it feels insulting, which is why people skip it and go back to consuming advice, including this part, which is ironic and not lost on me. The most boring strategy is usually the one that works. Improving by 1% a day sounds fake, like something someone says right before selling a course. But small actions compound, whether you respect them or not. Do almost nothing, consistently, and you become someone who almost does nothing. Do slightly more than yesterday, consistently, and it stacks in ways that feel illegal when you look back. At first, it doesn't feel like progress. It feels like nothing. That's the trap. People quit because the early stages are indistinguishable from stagnation. 6 months later, the math gets rude. A year later, you're not unrecognizable, but you're different enough that old excuses stop fitting. Most people are waiting for a feeling that never shows up. The right time, the surge of clarity, the moment where starting feels justified. Meanwhile, the version of you who actually does things is built through boring follow-through, not dramatic decision. Visualization helps, not in a mystical way, but because it reminds you who you're trying not to disappoint. Future you is very patient, but also very tired of your speeches. Starting today doesn't mean fixing everything. It means choosing one small action and keeping a promise so small, it would be embarrassing to break it. That's how identity changes, quietly. And once you start doing that, the idea of waiting another year begins to feel less reasonable. At some point, this stops being about improvement and starts being about honesty. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, where you notice patterns you've been politely ignoring. You don't suddenly feel different. You just feel slightly less convinced by your own explanations. That's usually how it starts. Not with motivation, with mild discomfort and fewer excuses that sound good out loud. The strange thing is how ordinary all of this is. There's no big villain here, no single bad habit, just a series of reasonable choices that add up to a life that looks fine from a distance and confusing up close. I know that version well. I've defended it passionately, with charts and optimism, and a suspicious number of bookmarks. And look, none of this guarantees anything. You can understand every word and still change nothing. That's not a moral failure. It's just very on brand for humans, especially tired ones watching videos like this late at night, pretending it's thinking time. Which is probably why the next question isn't about discipline or goals or fixing yourself. It's about what quietly reshapes you when you're not trying so hard. The things you do when you're not working on your life, but still somehow are. The hobbies you pick up casually that end up rearranging more than your schedule. Not because they're productive, just because they keep showing up.